you so much for being here tonight. And we are going to very fittingly wind the evening down with what I think is the best part of this night. You're going to get to hear from some of these kids that we've talked about. And we have 3 of them that are going to join us tonight. We have Erin Riley, who is here from our Clearview Club. Erin is not only a high school kid, but she is also a wildlife leader, which is not an easy trick to pull off. But Erin does it beautifully. And I have kids in wildlife, and I can attest to the fact that she's a huge blessing to us. We're also going to hear from John D'Alonzo, who's a graduate from our township club, and who is also working in our Capernaum ministry as well, and going through new training. And we are going to also hear from the man himself, Bill McCord, who is our one of our Capernaum kids, and he is Bill does Alan Jackson better than Alan Jackson does Alan Jackson, is the best way I can describe him to you. So please give all 3 of them a round of applause as they come.
Hi guys, my name is Erin. My leader Rube told me that this was kind of a big deal, so he told me not to mess up, and I'm going to try my best. So I grew up in a Christian family. Church was something that it was definitely not foreign to me. And you know, it was what I grew up with. And my thoughts on God growing up were that he was just this guy hanging out in the clouds, you know, just kind of counting up all the things that I did wrong. And I went to church and, you know, everything growing up, but I never really actually understood who Jesus really was. I guess this whole journey started for me back in 7th grade when my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, and she was not able to take care of herself anymore. So she moved in with me and my family, and she needed a 24-hour watch, and we all just kind of really, as a family, came together and you know, just took care of her for the year that she lived with us. And she was able to go home for about 6 months, and then the last you know, 3 or 4 months of her life, she came in and moved back in with us. And she passed away in December of 2009. And after that happened, I was completely shattered. I was broken. I held so much guilt because, you know, my whole family, we all took care of her so much. And I felt like there was something else that I could have done to have helped her and to have stopped this. And it really just left me in pieces, and I was broken. And I started doubting God. You know, like I said, my whole life, my parents have been telling me, God is good, you know, God is good. And I really started doubting it here. Well, then why did he take my grandmother away from me? And so, you know, I started getting depressed. And when I started to finally bounce back, my family was hit with another huge storm 6 months later after my grandma's passing. On June 9th of 2010, my dad was late picking me up from school, and it was not like him. He's a very, very punctual person. So, you know, for him to be a half an hour late picking me up from school was just not like him. So I called him, and there was no answer. And finally, when he got back to me, he had told me that my older brother, Sean, was coming to pick me up from school, because my younger brother, Eric, we nicknamed him Manzi when he was a baby. Manzi had a seizure on his class trip to Philadelphia. And, you know, that's how we found out that my grandma had brain cancer. So I couldn't do anything but go to that state of mind that my little brother has cancer, you know, and God's, you know, here we go again, you know, first Grammy, now Manzi, and the next day we did find out that he had cancer. And I remember sitting in the hospital with my Aunt Cindy, and I just blamed God for every single bit that happened. I remember just sitting there saying, why did God do this to us? You know, we just lost Grammy from the same thing. Like, why is he doing this again? He's out to get us. Like, it was just, you know, God was not good in that time, in my mind. He was just taking everything from me. And I was done with him. I didn't want to go to church anymore. I switched off my faith. And in doing that, I became even more depressed than what I was with my grandmother's passing. And I was just so angry, and I just felt all of this hatred in me. And you know, Manzi had to go through 2 brain surgeries and 6 months of chemotherapy, and no 11-year-old boy should have to go through that, and no family should have to go through that. So I just said, God, I'm done with you, and I'm going to do this my way because I don't trust you. So that was the end of my 8th grade year. Going into freshman year, I basically did everything that I could to rebel against God. And, you know, I was one person at home. I was the person who my parents wanted me to be. And then at school, I was the person who I thought my friends wanted me to be. But on either side, no matter which person that I was being, no one actually saw how broken and hurt I actually was. And I was out a lot my freshman year because of Manzi, and my teachers cut it very easy with me. They said, you just get in your assignments whenever you can, you don't have to worry about anything. And in doing that, kids started to notice that I had been cut a break by my teachers. So they started rumors that I was faking the whole thing. And one of my closest friends at the time one night had brought me to her house and said that someone had told her that I made up the whole thing to get attention. And that was my breaking point. I had it. I didn't want to do it anymore. And that night I went home and I took it out on myself. And I started cutting myself. I hated my life, and I just blamed, like I said, I blamed God for everything that had went wrong. But the only thing that was keeping me alive was the fact that my family desperately needed me. So that is what kept me going. Now during my whole freshman year, I had been going to Young Life. I knew what Young Life was through my older cousin who had been through Young Life, and I came out to a couple events when I was in middle school, and I loved it because it was just an awesome time. So, you know, every Tuesday I went out because I had a good time and because it was fun. But I never really paid attention to any of the club talks where we got real and started talking about God, and I just kind of zoned out. But the summer going into my sophomore year, I went to Camp Saranac, and I just remember having a blast all week, and then like club all year, zoning out during the club talks. But one night really stuck out to me, and that was the night that our speaker had told us how sin came into the world through Adam and Eve eating the apple. And because of that, there was this wall that was built between us and God that it was never meant to be there, but there was nothing that I could possibly do to break it down, and nothing that I could ever do could ever overcome it. I could never get over that wall. He also said that sin was not just rebelling against what God wanted us to be, but it was also just turning our backs and going our own way. And, you know, God wasn't the reason for all the sin in the world, and God wasn't the reason why my grandma had been diagnosed with cancer, and then my little brother, he wasn't. And I just felt so guilty and so shameful that I had blamed him, you know, through all those 2 years. I had blamed God for everything, and it wasn't his fault. And I remember after that club night, I broke down to my leader, Mary, and, you know, all she said to me was, Erin, you know, God has a plan for you, and he is in this, and, you know, this is all for a reason, and he loves you. And after she told me that, I knew that I wanted to turn and face God, but I didn't know how, and I really wasn't truly convinced, because I had all this shame and guilt and sin that had just been piling up on my plate, and I didn't want to be rejected, and I didn't want to trust him with my life, and I didn't want to trust him with my little brother's life. But, you know, God broke me down the night of the crosstalk, and he got to me. To see God send his own son for us on that cross that night, I could have never imagined that type of love for me, you know, and I was so just shameful and dirty and broken, and God wanted me in my darkest pit, and that is what held me, that is what got me. And during that night, we had 20 minutes of silence to reflect back to the crosstalk and everything that we had heard. And in that 20 minutes of silence, I accepted Christ into my life, and I let him take control. And ever since then, you know, the journey has not been easy, but it's been amazing. And I have met such an amazing family through Young Life, through this ministry, that they're always going to be here for me. And God is transforming my heart every single day. And, you know, if you would have talked to me back when I was in the darkness that I was in, and I was covered with sin, if you would have told me that I would be standing up here and telling all of you guys that, you know, about my story, and that I would have accepted Christ, I wouldn't have believed you. And if you would have told me that I would be standing up here as a wildlife leader, I really wouldn't have believed you. But it's just so, God's work has just been so visible in my life. And he is transforming me into the woman that he created me to be. And I have this wonderful family standing behind me, helping me do that. Thank you, guys.